Welcome to NinjaCast, a photography podcast powered by Studio Ninja, the world's highest rated business management app, built specifically for photographers. Listen and learn as the most successful photographers on the planet share their knowledge to help you transform every element of your photography business. Here's your host, Sally Shaw.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of NinjaCast. Today I'm joined by the lovely Dean Dampney. Dean's going to be talking about all sorts today, ranging from how he approaches a wedding holistically, right through to how you can attract an ideal client that really aligns with your core values and how you're looking to work. Let's get started. Hi Dean, how are you?
Hi Sally, really good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, I'm awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for carving the time out of your busy schedule to come and chat with me today. I think this is going to be a really interesting episode for our listeners.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's actually not that busy intentionally these days, but yeah, it's my pleasure to be here. Thanks.
Amazing. We'll get into that, I'm sure, during the podcast, actually. So, Dean, for people that may not have met you, might not have heard of you, can you give us a little bit of a backstory, talk about your time in the industry, how it started and how it's going?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it goes back to the last millennia, actually. So my first wedding that I photographed was in 1999. That was my first professional photography gig. A year later, I basically went on a trip around Australia, and I've got a couple of professional photography friends who were kind enough to gift me a bag of film. Again, we're going back a little bit now. So with that bag of film, I spent the next 6 months photographing my way around the country and came back and was fortunate enough to have an exhibition supported by Fujifilm back then. And at that point, I took it as a cue to basically take that part of my path photographically into the exhibition spaces and really focused as a photo artist, as a documentary photo artist, on that being the most dominant path for the next 10 to 12 years. It did coincide with basically the path of a photojournalist. I was working for basically the major mastheads in Australia at the time, the Herald, Fairfax, working for Fairfax Media, working for News Limited. And meanwhile, those weddings kept on coming on request. Fairly slowly in the beginning, and intentionally I didn't want to do any more than just a couple that were coming through on an annual basis. I was really busy at that time working as a full-time photographer for the papers, and likewise was really busy trying to get exhibitions together, solo exhibitions together on an annual basis. So if I started this conversation saying I'm not so busy these days, and intentionally it was the opposite back then. I was extremely busy. Look, the turning point or the pivot point in my photography career, not so not so strangely, came with a turning point in my relationship life where I met my wife, and we moved down the coast a couple of hours south of Sydney here on the east coast of Australia. So we moved down to up the Ulladulla region. It's about 3 hours south of Sydney. And that basically meant that there wasn't so much working for the newspapers as you could imagine. We transitioned, I guess, at that point globally, collectively as photographers from film to digital, which is another really huge coinciding pivot point. And basically all of a sudden the weddings were coming through thicker than ever. And it felt like a logical progression to take that photojournalistic and documentary approach that I'd had so firmly instilled in my foundations as a photographer philosophically, and try and approach the weddings that I was doing more and more of with that outlook, which was easy. It was the only way I was actually going to be able to shoot weddings in that way. In that approach, it aligned with obviously my belief system. I felt really good about it. It took a little bit of sort of massaging my clients' intentions towards the direction that I was more intent on taking them, away from the more typical portraits and ways of doing things historically. And long story short, it just seemed to basically be a calling not only for me, but also to my clients, the clients that were gravitating towards me were looking for something that aligned with their belief system, aligned with how they wanted their weddings photographed. And I guess the end of the story is I did that for until today, and we'll continue shooting weddings, but I was photographing a good 40 to 50 weddings a year from that period of about 2005 through to 2020, 2021. And then, COVID came along, but prior to COVID, we had some bushfires down here on the South Coast, and so that really destroyed, a lot of prospects for the wedding industry, full stop. But even prior to that, and only just, I came to a realization that I had another calling that was professionally on a different track, although coincidentally, not too dissimilar a track when it came to working with couples, and this time as a relationship counsellor specifically. So I basically did postgrad studies as a holistic counsellor and psychotherapist from the beginning of 2020 through to having just graduated about 4 or 5 months ago. And I've been practicing. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so I've been practicing. I guess actually from the 6-month mark of that 2-year postgrad studies as part of our prerequisites for collecting our prac hours. So that was always 1-to-1 anyway. It's just been an extension now through having actually got that certificate of having graduated with that master's, and now I'm basically combining those two hats, or wearing those two hats alternatively between shooting weddings, shooting shooting personal work as well, and still exhibiting. I just had my first solo exhibition again for the first time in about 10 or so years, just locally this time, as opposed to being up in Sydney. And I'm sort of loosely dancing between taking the odd photo and just meeting the odd client in the comfy corner of my couch here and at home, and shooting my personal work more passionately than ever.
I love that. That's fantastic. I feel like there's so much we can dig into there. First of all, you mentioned kind of that you were a photographer during the change where, we had to evolve from film to digital. How was that for you kind of as a professional in the industry at the time? Was it mind-blowing? Was it refreshing? Yeah,
it was so exciting just to have had all my life I was using film. So at that age, in 2003, what's that, maybe 2022 or something. So I was photographing, 32 in 2003. So I'm showing my age, but I had a film camera from the age of like 10 years old. So there's 20 years of putting those rolls of film through, and like 36 exposures in a roll of film at the most isn't a lot. And so to be able to basically just shoot endlessly without having to replace film was such a gift. It was awesome. And I think what happened for me was what happened with all of us as photographers that went through that transition, and all photographers that have come since, is that we learned to get really good, or a lot better, at a rapid rate because of the opportunity to be able to see our results time and time again at such a quickened pace. It was awesome.
Absolutely. I can imagine that you, like you say, that improvement side of things and that self-development, before there was a process in that. You had to wait to see, what you'd shot and whether it was as you'd intended or as you'd imagined at that moment. Whereas now, definitely we take for granted, I've never shot with film, 100% take for granted the fact that it's just there, it's instant, it's right in front of you, you can tweak it, take it again, and that's the shot that you were after. I can see that's, from a development side of view for a photographer, that was quite a challenge, previously.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially when you put that into the context of photographing weddings. I still sort of shoot that way. I don't refer back to my images as I'm shooting, but I do try and make a conscious note of doing that at least maybe a couple of times a wedding, just to make sure they haven't been shooting blanks for the previous 2 hours. But we had no idea what we're getting, and there was a real beauty in that. I really I still savor the process of film. It's like basically the Christmas presents under the Christmas tree that you have to sort of look at and feel and hold in your hands and weigh up as to what it might be inside. Just getting that film back, after that period of time, be it days or weeks, was so exciting. It was Christmas morning every time.
Oh, wow.
But Yeah, it definitely didn't lend itself to being able to sort of analyze the process nearly as efficiently as what it does now with digital.
Absolutely. You also mentioned about obviously now becoming a relationship counsellor, couples counsellor. How has that affected how you then work with your couples? So do you feel like there's been a definite shift since you've, gone down that path, or since you've qualified, or is that kind of just backing up how you've always worked with your couples?
Yeah, so definitely the latter statement there answers to the case for me. It's always been how I've worked with my couples, and I think that's been really a really good testing ground for me to, I guess, move into this part of my professional life. Not a testing ground in a negative way, but a testing ground in a really positive way. That's been where I've basically gained more wisdom than any other aspect or facet of my life, and I've always been extremely curious and intrigued when it comes to the human condition with self, but even more so when it comes to basically interacting with others. So I guess without trying to draw too much into it, without drawing that bow out too far, I've always at least subconsciously been intrigued with the interactions of all the people that are in front of my lens, and particularly the bride and grooms. And on a day too, that's it's obviously heightened and comes with a lot of expectation, and normally with obviously a ton of love, which there's a real emphasis in all my work to try and depict that aspect of our essence, the one and only foundational aspect of our essence, as authentically and honestly as I possibly can. So yeah, that's been a study that I've been conducting for a long time now, photographically, and now even without the camera in front of my eye.
I guess that evolves every day as well, right? If it's never complete.
Totally, yeah. Look, if I didn't have either of those professional hats, it'd still be the same. I'm still introspecting, and I'm still philosophizing, contemplating, and meditating, practicing all those inquiries for sure.
I love that. Fantastic. So we've kind of touched there that's the way you've always worked with your couples. So how would how you work with your couples be different to how I might work with mine? What's different about kind of your ideal client and how you work with them?
For sure. I guess the really simple summarizing way of answering that is that I don't strategize anything, and this is just me. Not to say that there's a right way or a wrong way, but yeah, I don't approach life strategically these days more than ever. So for one, I've always basically advocated, or at least in my practice, in terms of how I project myself out into the world with my, I don't even want to use the word branding, but with the way that I portray myself, which is like the rest of us through my website, or at least through social media. And my website historically was a website first, social media came along next, and then I guess last but not least, the way that we do that is person to person. But it's always been really authentic, just truth telling and trying to I guess paint the picture of who I am with as much complete unabashed honesty as possible. And with that, again, whether it be through social media, through my website or otherwise, I've attracted the people that are right for me. So I've never had an incongruency, or I've never had a disconnect with my clients, with the exception of one or two over the years. And at this point, it's kind of crazy to think, but I've photographed like well over 800 weddings, and I have basically just totally loved every single one of those clients. Again, with that one exception that there's no way I even want to go there, but it's all good. It was a great teaching. But so yeah, look, that's from the inception of the process in terms of attracting the right people. I just trust that they'll be right for me. They can see on my website that I represent myself in something in a way that they're obviously attracted to, and I think that is simply relatively laid back, if not very laid back, also super confident and professional, and with an artistic eye. I think people would see through my imagery, and also sense, I guess, above all, and most importantly to me, a sense of naturalness. So it's hard to find those key words that don't sound cliche these days, but yeah, definitely with a sense of something that just simply feels, not contrived, something that's uncontrived. I think there's an essence. I know there's an essence of that in my work that people are magnetized to. When it comes to actually photographing my couples, or anyone, any human, any person on any given day, but let's say it's their wedding day, for instance, I rock up without any preconceived ideas. I guess like as a little bit of as a sort of out of the normal. I don't tend to meet any of my clients before their wedding, and that's not because I don't want to. It's just because I'm geographically quite isolated, and I live still on the south coast of New South Wales, and a good 3 or 4 hours from the closest, or at least 3 hours from the closest city. So most of my clients are coming from the cities. They're coming down here, having destination weddings, and it just doesn't tend to be the case that we're able to find the time to align to meet face to face prior to the weddings. I encourage that because that works for me time wise. It also works. It doesn't detract from my process. I'm able to basically arrive to my clients on their wedding day and feel just as connected to them as what I feel like I would, if we spent hours beforehand. It's not to say that I don't basically encourage them to come and hang out and have a cup of tea with me or whatever it might be, but yeah, on the same note, I'm happy to have another couple of hours up my sleeve on a weekday to basically put myself into my other passions at the same time. It starts on their wedding day with just hanging out and just being there and just being really open and being without any judgment, without any strategy of what shot I'm going to take next, and just totally receiving or being receptive to the environment, particularly the personal environment, the environment of the people around me, and what draws me on an instinctive level as being a heightened moment, I guess, from an emotional perspective or from a connected perspective. Really what I'm looking for. I'm just looking for those cues of connection, often between two people or a group of people, or from one person to themselves. Those moments where people are anything but contrived, where those moments, those real moments, are just, they don't have to be raw, but they have to be real to be real. Obviously they have to be poignant to speak to what really matters. And on a wedding day there's a context of what matters, and I think almost all of us would agree that that's lovingness.
Absolutely. So when your website's beautiful. It tells anybody who you are and what you're about in seconds, which I think is a thing that every photographer aims for, right? That's how we get the clients that align with us and that are on our same wavelength and that we are going to enjoy shooting their wedding. So in terms of kind of attracting the right people, do you feel that it's just total straight up honesty? Are we, is it a case of perhaps just, putting yourself out there, put your heart on your sleeve, or is there more that photographers can be doing than that?
Yeah, such an interesting question. Yeah, look, I want to sort of have that knee-jerk reaction and just blurt out loud that, it's always, no matter what, all about straight up honesty, authenticity. But, I don't know, it's not like I'm writing down that I, had 3 shots of tequila last night. I didn't have 3 shots of tequila last night, nor did I 3 months ago, or over the last 3 months. But, before that, I caught up with a bunch of friends. They're all turning 50 around the same time, and we drank bottles of it. And that's so not, basically representative of who I am. And I don't necessarily blog that either. So there's a skillful means or an approach, I think, taking that middle line of between authenticity and not oversharing. That I'm all about basically sharing. I'm all about giving what is, but it's all about basically giving ourselves in a way that we really are representing ourselves. And we definitely do things that don't represent a standard day to day or intentions otherwise from time to time.
Yeah, absolutely. You've mentioned, or we've mentioned kind of briefly the holistic side of things, and that you're really passionate about exploring and experimenting with that further. I mean, I think working with people is something that we perhaps take for granted every day. You know, we are, you know, sometimes I guess with photographers, we're home birds. We can be in the office editing away, doing all the things we need to do for our business, which is a lot of alone time sometimes. But then when you have the complete parallel where you're at a wedding, you can be surrounded by an awful lot of people. So how can our listeners be more aware of the holistic side of working with people rather than just taking it for face value?
Yeah, I really love the way that you framed that question. And yeah, just to be straight up and probably not in the realm of oversharing, I'm really comfortable to say that I'm definitely not an extrovert. And, you know, look, I'm pausing here to kind of remember exactly which way I'm relatively introverted for sure, but I also am able to turn it on completely. And, you know, I've mastered the the art of turning it on at weddings. I don't mean in like basically presenting myself in a fake way, but just tuning into the best version of myself, the most grounded and just not only peaceful, but also, loving version of myself. I'll always go into a wedding, I guess drawing on all the practices that I've got to put myself in that place. And that normally culminates in just a quick 10-minute meditation before I'm about to walk in the door. I'm a little bit more lackadaisical these days with that approach, really for the fact that I'm more in that headspace more often anyway. So I find that I don't need to sort of go from woe to go so much. I'm pretty much just cruising in there. The only thing I've actually got to remember is basically the name of my clients and that I'm actually there on the right day, because I've found that the further I've gone on, not for lack of love for my clients or intention of being everything I can be for them on the day, but I've got more and more casual in my mind. It's the antithesis of basically in most wedding photographers' experience of having, I definitely had an experience in my early days, and no, it's obviously super common of levels of anxiety, even if it be low level for that 24 hours or 12 hours. Occasionally I remember just leading into a wedding for days, just contemplating at a low level, but a higher resonance is to lower level resonance of anxiety, really is what it would have been leading up to their wedding. So I definitely bring that state of mind into it from a holistic perspective. That gives you an answer already, but it's also basically seeing, for me, seeing all the interconnectedness is one sort of aspect of the nature of the whole picture, the bigger picture. And when I refer to that, I'm not religious, but I do basically have a sense for there being more than single little earth vehicles here. We call our bodies and our little minds that stick in them, and having this little independent sort of movement robotically around the world, casually knocking into someone. I think we're so much more than that. So I take in that really strong belief of interconnectedness and and also just of the essence of in so many different descriptions we call it the divine or the great mystery or God or just the the highest self. So I really take all of that with me and really intentionally try and give all of that as much as I possibly can. And it's a reciprocated gift. It's not like I'm out there, basically thinking I've got all this stuff to give, and it's just selfish as much as I'm receiving. Like I'm just trying to basically resonate in the highest way or on the highest vibration. Now it's sounding really hippie, but just trying to basically bring all of that intention as much as I can all the time. And weddings do allow me to basically practice the art of that as well, if not better than any other setting that I found myself surrounded by.
Absolutely. Do you find that your kind of the preparation on the run up to the wedding day? So like, for example, I would send like a questionnaire out to the couple to find out the timings, the run of the day, what time the ceremony is, the list of group shots that I need. I would imagine that goes against everything and the way that you shoot a wedding. So how does your prep perhaps differ to mine?
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot more expedient because I basically just don't do any of that. Look, I guess what I'll do is I'll give you that answer in the reverse way and tell you what prep I do, and then we can make a few comparisons. That'll be pretty simple though, because basically I kind of don't do any prep.
Yeah.
Let's see. So the process is I get an email inquiry that comes through my website typically, if not directly, but usually it's through my website. It's not that infrequent these days. As time goes on, more and more, a lot of people are coming through referrals. So there's a sense of those prospective clients already having a feel for the kind of photographer I am, having seen my work through their friends or having actually seen me work at another friend's wedding potentially. Not all the time, but yeah, there'd be a significant proportion, maybe 25-30% of those people. I replied back with basically a quote. They say yes, assuming that they go ahead and book me for their wedding. I see them on their wedding day. That's basically it. I'm laughing out loud because I realize just, there's a great gap there over that 12 months of all those other prep things that I don't do. Look, I say to my clients really as a response to the things that they're asking, and often they do, if there's anything else that needs to be done. And it's twofold. It's often in relation to the invoicing. And I simply say, look, and in relation to everything, I'll send you guys an email basically the week before your wedding with an invoice. It's due basically before your wedding day. If that works for you guys, if it doesn't, that's fine too. As far as everything else goes, I just need to know what time I start and where. And that basically gives me that point A, that X marks the spot on the map and what time it is. I do suggest to my clients, if we end up chatting beyond that email correspondence, that really brief email correspondence, that I encourage them to basically allow for, and these are just patterns that I've seen so many times repeatedly, that I suggest my clients allow time for letting people wrap their arms around them after their actual wedding ceremony and be congratulated, and to really bask in that really, really special time, again, from my perspective. But I tend not to have clients that disagree, having experienced that after their wedding ceremony. And I say that too mainly for the fact that I find that most of my clients don't factor that into their timelines, if they've got a timeline. Some of my clients are completely aligned to the extent that they're just like, hey, come along, we want you to start here at this time. Look, we don't want a single portrait, no family shots, just document the day from start to finish. That to me is my dream.
Yeah.
It's not to say I don't like all the other facets of it, but I'm like, yeah, okay, perfect. We're completely in the same place there. But look, that's literally only happened a small number of times over my career. Going back to the clients that are more typical for me, I just suggest, one, they make that time, which isn't, like a huge kind of revelation at all. But secondly, that if they're going to want family photographs, which it suggests if they don't, that their families will, it's going to be quick and easy, maybe 10 minutes or so. And for them to just delegate to, a sibling or whoever it is that might understand their immediate family structure, just so that those people can pull in their immediate family on the day. I don't need to have a shot list of all the various combinations of their immediate family. I guess the next thing is, and it's normally the first question in my client's mind if we're having a conversation, but the last one for them to ask with regards to portraits, because it's still obviously a huge aspect of most people's weddings, culturally and collectively, globally. And they know too that they've got this guy who's like the candid, uncontrived, natural guy. But on the same note, they're like, oh shit, I really like to have a couple of really beautiful portraits of us. And actually, I don't know if one or two will be enough. So we have a really quick conversation around that. And what I emphasize is that I'm completely unbound by any rules, and I'm happy to basically go along with anything that works for them. But on the same note, I already know that we've come together on a premise that they're not going to be asking me to take 2 hours of bridal party portraits. What I typically say, if we're having that conversation, is that I very much believe in the power of the portrait. I love portraiture. I love photographing portraiture. I love connecting, the essence of what my clients are, there for on the day, their loving essence for each other through the camera and for them. And, I love basically doing that for the next generation, for the grandkids and great grandkids that get to look at the photographs of, basically their grandparents and, in hundreds of years to come. I love that premise, and for that reason, I really do carry a huge amount of importance around it. But what I also suggest is that if we can basically photograph, or if they'd like to be photographed as a couple, that hopefully that wherever they're being photographed holds a poignancy for them or a significance for them as far as the location. Again, that's not something I necessarily have expectations around. I mean, typically their wedding location, automatically just gains huge significance for the fact that they chose it for their wedding anyway. But I guess as soon as my clients start inquiring into multiple locations, that's my response. That just, if we're going to be driving around, potentially photographing various formations of you two as a couple with different backdrops, and there's not a cynicism that's coming in here, but there's a philosophical perspective that the backdrops are pretty, and if they're significant for their lives as a couple that they are, that's great. But as soon as we start getting onto that Rolodex of just swapping out backdrops, basically metaphorically, or with each destination the car takes them to, it becomes, to me, and I suggest to them, that it becomes repetitious and it loses its essence, it loses its significance and meaning. So yeah, long story short, is basically a couple of locations feels really good for me. I like a bit of variety. It gives us a little play with light and everything. And the way, if I guess the majority of my clients don't have places in mind that they need to drive to, typically my clients are really happy just to stay on the beautiful properties or wherever it is that they're getting married anyway. And I guess without any strategy at all at the time it comes to actually taking those portraits, I'd suggest that we just see what calls us and move accordingly.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I'm going to move on to another topic, which I must say, when I got your email, I was like, where's this going? Like, what's this all about? And the topic is bare feet, which isn't something we've ever discussed here on Ninjacast before, but I'm totally here for it. So obviously in kind of line with your lifestyle and the holistic approach that you have, providing obviously the couple are okay with it, I presume, you often shoot weddings barefoot.
Yeah, I do. And I'm often photographing weddings where my clients are barefoot as well. So yeah, that's usually a pretty good tell for me to work out that I'm not culturally stepping on anyone's toes. Look, I live barefoot basically even through winter on the most part, unless it's really cold. I actually have a couple of Uggies. I got my Ugg boots on right now. It's pretty chilly this evening. But yeah, certainly during the day, I really like to feel the ground beneath my feet. It just feels good. I really like that. I do keep in the back of my mind, something someone said, there's the charge that the earth receives from whatever the billions of lightning strikes, but whatever. I don't actually necessarily take too much of that into context, but there's a charge in the ground. There's a connection to the ground that's felt easier when it's not basically separated with like rubber soles. And I like to feel that all the time, and particularly when I'm doing stuff which I want to feel as connected as I possibly can, when that connection feels really, really important for me. There's exceptions that I'm obviously quite mindful of, such as churches. I don't think I've got away with basically walking down the aisle barefoot through a plush church yet. I don't tend to photograph church weddings, but I certainly have photographed a number of them over the years. I am quite often on the beach, so shoes are rarely mandatory in that situation for everyone, and I embrace that wholeheartedly, as you'd expect. Likewise, there's this sort of thing where it comes to photographing the bride and whoever she's surrounded by getting ready. And quite often I feel like if I've got shoes on, that they're actually just not appropriate for walking through the nice, shiny floors anyway. So I take them off, and more often than not, just leave them there and just throw them in the back of the car and go, oh, that was a silly idea to even think about wearing those and conforming in the first place. So I'm pretty into not wearing shoes at as many opportunities as I can.
I love that. Do you feel like it kind of feeds your creativity? Do you feel kind of more grounded when you've not got shoes on? You feel like you can more freely concentrate on what you're doing, or is it more just literally a personal preference?
Yeah, don't you think that if we're going to dance, we think about kicking our shoes off straight away, right? Like, isn't that a romantic notion right there? Like, I'm not going to go as far as saying that we're going to all dance naked at the end of the night, but I'll start with my shoes and just it feels good. See how we go. Exactly. It's no, I haven't actually had that opportunity to photograph a ceremony of people at a wedding completely naked yet at the end of the night. That hasn't happened, but certainly barefoot, absolutely, every time.
Yeah. I love that. Perfect. Dean, if you could start your career all over again, is there anything you'd change over the years? Anything you'd do differently?
Isn't that an interesting one? Look, I just don't have any other way of viewing the things that are tricky and challenges that we've all faced in whatever context as anything but teachings and gifts. So no, not at all. Let me just pause for a second though and see if anything jumps in, because there's definitely been a couple of, look, absolutely. And I wouldn't change it, and I would at the same time. The hardest, most cringe worthy moment of my whole entire life, maybe, that just so happens to relate to weddings, was that very first wedding that I alluded to before, back in 1999, of the two most gorgeous people you could ever imagine having the opportunity to photograph. It was totally, in the rainforest of Byron Bay, and it was the most beautiful semi-overcast day where the sun came out and rainbows are there. It's that whole deal. And they were two of my closest friends at the time as well, literally Jack and Jackie. And Jackie, had been approached. She was a country girl and just salt of the earth. Jack too, salt of the earth. Just such beautiful, authentic people. They asked me if I'd photograph their wedding, knowing that I definitely loved photography, and also that I'd never photographed a wedding, let alone anything on a professional level as a photographer. So I like to say that out loud to myself, just to convince myself that they knew what they were letting themselves in for. And basically film again. And when I was photographing Jackie getting ready, it's just, I still can picture it now, that 23 years later, this beautiful light coming through the window of this room at the top story of a timber shack in the middle of the rainforest once again. And I just remember hearing the shutter, the mechanical shutter. In these days of electronic shutters, the mechanical shutter just not sounding right. It sounded like a slow click instead of a fast detonated click. And I had the presence of mind to be able to recognize that was odd. And I did a few little sort of, quick inspections of my gear, and I couldn't find anything that was standing out. I just kept on photographing. Before I know it, you were 15 minutes, 20 minutes later, we're basically moving down the aisle, and you're doing that backward shuffle as basically the bride's coming towards you. This beautiful vision of absolutely, the epitome of just paradise realms in terms of everything you could ever hope for. And again, it just is this disconcerting noise in the back of my mind, being my camera still just really slowly clicking away. End of story is that I photographed the whole wedding like that. I had a little Instamatic film camera that took along as well. I had a little built-in flash. I used that for some of the dance floor shots. Those shots worked. The rest of them, the other 13 out of 16 films that I photographed on my SLR at the time, were all shot at about 1/5 of a second shutter speed. What happened is that basically my aperture locked in at my aperture locked down at basically the smallest aperture setting in my lens at f/22, but it didn't register in the camera. Certainly it wasn't registered on my lens or my aperture ring at all. And basically using aperture priority with my camera, it just was misinterpreting what it needed to be shooting at. And basically it got me in a huge amount of bother, namely a whole lot of extremely artistic, in other words, just indiscernible images of my blurry, beautiful bride and blurry, beautiful groom. And it was just, it was heart-wrenching for everyone involved, particularly Jackie and particularly me. Not too sort of unaligned with the typical culture of grooms versus brides. Jack was, he was more mocking of my inability to take a decent wedding photograph more than being too upset himself. The day in itself was memories strong enough for him. But look, it was devastating, to be honest. And I've never looked back, I guess, in that respect, in every respect. And there's probably a large part of that, at least semi-consciously, that's driven me to take my career as far as I have.
That's inspirational, though, that you've not let that stop you, because there's a lot of photographers. We all make mistakes day in, day out, like, let alone, goodness me, the amount of photographers that would still be making mistakes very regularly today if we were still shooting on film. Like I find it unpredictable. You can only have so much control, and then the rest of it is kind of left in the hands of the gods, isn't it? There's so much you can do, and then the rest is up to the camera. Digitally, obviously, we have so much more control over that. But I think that would have, a lot of photographers, we can have, I don't know, a split moment where the camera, a digital camera freezes, now a DSLR, as the bride's walking down the aisle, and we didn't quite get as many as we wanted to, or we literally only got one shot of her, or we got none at all. That could be career ending for some photographers. They couldn't, they wouldn't be able to move past that. But the fact that you've gone on so many years later, you're still loving weddings, you've got couples that are totally on your wavelengths, totally aligned with you, that are shooting, gorgeous weddings with you, and is just kind of testament to, people make mistakes and then they move forward.
Yeah, thanks, Sally. Yeah, look, the next wedding that came along was about a year later, and again, that was two extremely close friends, and I just felt compelled to say, yeah, sure, I'll give it my best shot, but understand clearly that my history is 100% failure at that point of the one from one that I failed to capture. And thankfully, again, that was filmed. So we're only in the year 2000 at that point. It was just such a relief to get that film back from the lab, and just know that it was all good.
You nailed it. Awesome. Well, if our listeners would like to find out more about you, get in touch with you, have a chat with you some more, Dean, how can they do that?
Look, at the moment, I've been really slack on this, not even slack intentionally. I've let all my wedding photography and other photography social media profiles just sit there completely dormant. And everything now, as far as what I put up and put out to the world, is through my Instagram profile, which is just my name as one word, which is Dean Dampney. So DEANDAMPNEY. So Dean Dampney is my Insta ID. That basically links into a bunch of stuff. And actually, funnily enough, I'm just realizing that I don't think it even links into my wedding website, which is southcoastwedding.com.au. And look, from the latest professional role that will no doubt basically be the next long-term endeavor alongside, any time that I've got behind the camera. I go by Nature Mind as far as my holistic counseling psychotherapy goes. So that's basically a website, which is naturemind.com.au. I'm pretty sure that's it. Did I say anything else? I've got a podcast out there at the moment as well, which is I guess accessible. It is accessible on all podcast feeds. That's called Conversations for Men and Women. Conversations for Men and Women, where I'm joined by a couple of other holistic counsellors and psychotherapists with the odd guest as well. There's about 3 or sometimes 4 of us, and we discuss things like love and relationship and connection, and all things that relate to basically being together, hopefully, or not, and how we deal with that.
Absolutely. I love that. That's fantastic. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, Dean. I can't thank you enough for carving out the time to come and chat and give us, a whole different approach to weddings and how we interact with people. I've loved every single second.
Yeah, it's been such a pleasure. And thanks so much, Sally. I really, really, really appreciate it. And it's been cool to connect. Thank you.
Amazing. Not a problem. Well, hopefully I may be over in Australia sometimes. I can come and catch you and have a beer with you.
Yeah, I'd absolutely love that. Cheers, Sally.
Awesome. Thanks, Dean. See you again.
My pleasure. See you.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Okay, guys, that's everything from me today. Thank you so much again to Dean for coming and having such an open, honest conversation with us. It was truly a breath of fresh air. If you guys would like to find out more or read the show notes, you can head to www.studioninja.co/episode 66. As always, please don't forget to rate us on the podcast platform that you're listening on. A little bit of love goes a very long way. I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of NinjaCast, brought to you by Studio Ninja. Beautifully designed and super easy to use, Studio Ninja will help you manage your leads, clients, shoots, invoices, contracts, workflows, and so much more. To learn more or start your 30-day free trial, go to www.studioninja.co.